Well, howdy there, partner. Well, I reckon it's time that we start talking about inverse functions and how to find the inverse function. Giddy up. All right, mathletes, here we go. We're looking to see if these two functions, h of x and k of x, are they inverses? All right, so what do we have to show to prove or disprove if they're inverses? All right, so what we're going to do is we'll take one of these functions, we'll say k of x, and we're going to plug it into h of x. So we take one function and we stick it inside the other function. And this is how baby functions are born, you see. All right, and if they are functions, what we get as a result is whatever we started with, which is that x. All right, likewise, we could go the other way around. You could take k of x and just plug in h of x. And regardless of where you start, if they are inverses of one another, you're going to get whatever you started with that input. All right, so let's see how this looks all played out. All right, so let's go ahead and let me highlight. I'm going to start with one that people probably have more trouble with, which is this one right here. Just in this example. All right, but it's not bad at all. You will see. All right, so my focus is I want to grab this function on the outside, this k of x. Here it is. All right, so I'm going to grab that k of x. And notice I have x, that's my variable. This is what's changing. And I'm going to add 5. And I'm going to divide it by 6. But notice, let's see here, let me change colors. What I'm going to plug in here for x, is h of x. And here's my h of x. So this, I'm going to plug it in right here. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to plug in 6x minus 5, because that's what it tells me to do. That's pretty awesome, because we're going to see what happens with that negative 5 and that positive 5. That's right. If you listen to the person right behind you, they said they cancel, right? And I don't have to worry about the parentheses in this case because there's nothing to distribute, all right? So we're left with 6x over 6, right? So in our numerator, oops, wrong button. In our numerator, all we're left with is 6x. In the denominator, we just have that 6. And what's going to happen to these two? Bam, they cancel. And what do you know it? They leave us with what we started with. So what can we say about these two functions? Are they inverses? Yes, they are. All right, so if they ever give you two functions, that's what we're going to do. All right, we're going to take one function and plug it into the other function. Another question that might come up is, well, let's say they give us a function and we know there's an inverse. How do I find that inverse? Let's take a look. All right, mathletes, what we're going to do something a little different in this video. In fact, I've been watching hours and hours of YouTube, and I haven't seen anybody do this. And this is very helpful. And what we're going to do here is, here's a challenge to you. I want you to write down these steps. So instead of me laying out everything we do, you're going to take notes and you're going to write these steps so that they make sense to you. Don't just copy down what I have. Right? I want you to understand what is it that we're doing. All right? So if you want me to look at your steps, comment down below. I'll be glad to. All right, so here we go. When we're finding the inverse, again, let's say we looked at this graph And you could clearly see that there's an inverse. It's a one-to-one function, that there's an inverse. All right, so this is what we do. We take that function, and what's another way of writing f of x, or k of x, or h of x? Well, that just represents y. So here we have y equals k plus 5 over 6. And if we recall, inverse functions, the domain of, let's say, k of x is really the range of k inverse of x, the inverse function. So the domains and the ranges, right, they kind of switch places. The x and the y's, they switch places. So for that reason, what we're going to do here is we're actually going to change in our next step all our x and our y values. So that's step 2. We change all our x and our y values. And so remember, you're writing down these steps. Because if you just copy down what I have here, those aren't notes, right? Those aren't helpful. So I want you, it's like a journal. It's a math journal. You write down what we're doing. And make sure you understand why. All right. So now we have x equals y plus 5 over 6. All right. That's not very helpful, especially if I'm trying to graph this. All right. So normally what we do is we have what variable isolated? Well, typically we have y equals something. So let's solve this for y. Here we go. So let's multiply both sides by 6. So these 6's cancel. So you're left with 6x equals y plus 5. All right. Is y by itself yet? Of course not. So let's go ahead and subtract 5 from both sides. So we are left with y equals 6x minus 5. And what did we just find here? Well, we were looking for the inverse function. So this is the inverse function. And remember, the notation is we have k inverse. K raised to the negative 1 power, but that's just notation. It doesn't mean that's 1 over k. This is just telling us, it's telling the reader that what you have just found here is the inverse function. This is the inverse function of k of x, right? So if you wanted to check your work, what's awesome is we could just plug this function into our original function, and if you recall, we should get what we started with to begin with. All right, we should just get x if I were to plug this function into our last function. All right, I cave in. I'm going to do another example for you. All right. So let's see if we recall. Tell me what to do first. I'm listening.
And it's time to answer that fascinating question. What is the Sesame Street number of the day?
Good. We change this function. We call it y. Perfect. So there's our first step. All right. Step 2. What do we do with our variables? Excellent. We change them. Wherever you see a c, you put a y, and wherever you put a y, you put the c. So we're left with c equals y plus 2 over 6. Now we're getting somewhere. All right, let's solve for y, that's right. Multiply both sides by 6. So now, on one side you have me, 6c, oh thank you. All right, so you have 6c equals y plus 2. And then we're solving for y, so go ahead and subtract 2 from both sides. Bam, so we're left with 6c over there minus 2 equals y. All right, and remember, tell your audience what you just found. Y is really the inverse function of r of c. So write that down. We have the inverse function equals 6c minus 2. And you're done. All right, so hopefully that helps in finding the inverse. If you have any questions, comment down below and I'll be glad to help you out. Bye.